Today is March 17, 2024. We're here to interview Juliana Gnevich, who is a survivor of the Holocaust. The interviewer is Esther Andor, and the videographer is Robert Wilson. The video is done under the auspices of the USC Shoah Foundation, and the video will be in English.
And recording.
So good afternoon, Juliana.
Hi.
And thank you very much for agreeing to doing this interview. My first question is if you could tell me your name, your maiden name, your married name, and spell it.
Sure. My name is Juliana Schwartz Gnevich. Schwartz is Schwartz. Gnevich is Gniwisch.
And could you tell me where you were born and when?
I was born in Košice, Czechoslovakia in 1942, September 11th.
Thank you. So first of all, we're going to talk about your grandparents, whatever you know about them. I would like to start with the paternal grandparents, if you could tell me their names.
My father's parents lived in Hungary, in Budapest. His name was Mayer Usher Schwartz. And my grandmother was Henya Schwartz. And my grandfather died before the war, and he's buried in Budapest in the cemetery there. My grandmother later went to Israel, and she passed away in near Kiryat Shemona up north.
And when you say later she went to Israel, was it before the war or after the war?
It was after the war, but I don't remember exactly. I don't remember. I know that she went there with my father's other brothers and sisters. There were 8 brothers and sisters altogether. After the war, only 4 of them survived. My father, a brother who lived in Haifa, who had no children. He had a sister who was married and lived in Bnei Brak, and another sister who survived, remarried and moved to Brooklyn, which I had met her after she moved to Brooklyn, and I am in touch with her children.
And do you know how the 4 who survived and your grandmother, how they survived in Budapest? Any information on that?
I don't. I don't know if my father ever knew, but he never really told us. I just know that they were there, and I met my grandmother once. And like I said, I met the other uncles and aunts while they were still alive. None of them are alive anymore.
Where did you meet your grandmother? In Israel?
In Israel.
In Israel. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about what kind of occupation your grandfather had, what they made their living of?
I don't know because he died. My husband was still a young boy. And I know that
Your father?
My father was a young man. And he had to leave yeshiva to go and work to support his 8 brothers and sisters. I'm not sure what he did for a living there.
Do you know how religious they were?
They were very religious.
Hasidic or just Orthodox?
In Hungary, it wasn't like Hasidic. My grandfather had a beard, but like a modern beard. My grandmother wore a sheitel, but they were like, I don't know if you can call them Hasidic, but they were very, very Orthodox. They davened in the Orthodox shul in Hungary because there was a big conservative, like it was called the Neolog synagogue, but they didn't pray there.
No, they probably went to Kazinci Street.
Yes.
Kazinci Street synagogue.
Yeah. We lived on a street called Kazarutsa.
That's where they lived.
Where we lived.
You lived.
Yes.
Where about is that, do you know?
I never went back to Hungary. My parents went a few times after the war, when we were already married. They went a few times back to go to the graves, but I never managed to go back.
How about your maternal grandparents? What are their names?
So my mother's father's name was Yekasil Yehuda Goldstein, My grandmother was Chaya Rivka Breindl Goldstein. Her maiden name was Rappaport. They had a cheese factory, not kosher cheese, that they supplied to the city, and they lived in Miskolc, which is, I don't know, it's about an hour away from Budapest, around.
A little more.
A little more? I don't remember. But I do know my mother worked with some of her sisters in the cheese place. My mother was kind of like the bookkeeper there. She was very good with numbers.
What did the other girls do?
Some of them were selling behind the counter. My grandfather was a very Hasidic person, and he learned. And the girls kind of looked after the shop or the factory. I don't remember exactly. I just know stories that my mother used to tell me about how they all worked together in the cheese factory.
Did your grandmother work with them?
I don't think so. I know that my mother used to tell me that my grandfather used to bring home all the poor people Friday from the city after shul when nobody had where to eat. He would always bring them home to our house, and it didn't matter if they were religious or not religious, or if they knew how to pray or not. It was inconsequential. They had a very open house, and he was a very kind and generous and pious person.
And you mentioned that he was very Hasidic.
Yes.
Where did he pray?
I don't know.
But you did say something about where he went every Shabbos.
Oh, he used to go after Shabbos every week to Karastir. And the Rebbe of Karastir, his name was Reb Shayele Karastir. So he had, every Shabbos night, he had a big meal. It was called Melave Malke. And a lot of people from around the area that couldn't be there for Shabbat used to come after Shabbos. And they used to go by train. And there were a lot of miracle stories about Reb Shayele. Even my mother told me crazy stories that I honestly sometimes didn't even believe they were true. And then this book came out. You should really read it. It's about Reb Shayele Karastir and all the miracles that he did, and that he had other, that people lived through, like real miracles.
Can you remember any story your mother told you?
I actually do. She told me once that it was on a Matzah Shabbos. They would come on the ready to go home, and the Rebbe told them, "Here, take some cake." And they said, "It's only a 40-minute train ride. Why would we need to take cake?" And the Rebbe said, take the cake. And they took it. And during the middle of the trip back home, the front of the train disconnected from the back of the train, and they were stuck there till the morning, till some other train came to take them back. So the cake was very handy. My mother told me another story. There was a big anti-Semite who used to come to the cheese store and made a lot of tzurs for my grandfather. And after one Matzah Shabbos again, he went and he told the Rebbe about this guy that was making him so much tzurs. So the Rebbe said to him, "Don't worry. A dog that barks doesn't bite." Anyways, the next day, the man had a heart attack, and that was the end of him. So they never had any problems anymore from him. Those are some of the stories. There were more, but I can't remember them all.
Do you know how big this cheese factory was? How many employees they had?
I don't. It wasn't a huge enterprise. It was just barely enough, I think, for them to all live on.
But basically, so they produced the cheese and they sold all the cheese. They
Yes.
weren't wholesale. They sold the cheese they produced.
I think wholesale.
Wholesale as well.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about so they had 5 daughters.
Yes.
Did they have any sons?
No.
So it's
Only 5 daughters. 4 of them survived, and they came to Canada, and we lived together with them. One of them, my grandfather got sick. He got TB. And my youngest aunt was not married yet. The others were all married. And so she went with him to the hospital. I don't know exactly what year it was, but I know that the Germans came in and they emptied out the hospital and they took all the patients and whoever was there to Auschwitz. And from what my mother found out from people who survived, that he had died in Auschwitz. My aunt, for somehow there was a story that she was on a ship and the ship got bombed. And then later on, I saw a podcast. It was also somebody from the Shoah Foundation. I don't know exactly how the story went, but there was a German ship. You know the story about the German ship.
But tell me what you know. I looked it up, but tell me what you know.
So what this lady was saying was that there was this German ship that they modeled after the Titanic, and they used to take all the fancy and rich German Nazi soldiers and people on the ship to show them that they're just like America or like England. They could do the same. And as the war was coming to an end, they saw that they were losing. So they had a plan that they would take all the surviving people from Auschwitz, walk them to this ship, and they would sail to America with all the brass, the top brass from Nazis, and they would say to them, look, here's, I don't know how many thousand refugees that survived Auschwitz. I'll give them to you if you let us survive. That was their plan. But what happened was, I don't know, somehow this woman found someone in England that opened up the archives and found out that a British pilot bombed the ship, not knowing that there were Jewish survivors on it, and all of them drowned in that particular ship. That's what I heard.
What was the name of this aunt? Magda?
Magda.
That's Magda's story. What happened to the grandmother?
My grandmother lived to 103 years old. I have a picture of her.
Where did she survive?
Here. Well, she came with us where we went during, after they took my grandfather, so she lived with my aunt, one of my aunts. And my aunts and us, we went together to hide in the mountains, in the Carpathian Mountains. My father, they took to Siberia to work. He was a young, healthy man, so they took him to Siberia. But he had a lot of wealthy connections when he was in Budapest. He had a beautiful fur store. And a lot of the top brass used to come, and he would put fur collars on their uniforms and on their coats and on their wives. And he told us a story, and it's very interesting, that it was just as the Germans were coming and the Hungarians and the Germans got together and they were going to get all the Jews together. And my father had some uniforms in his place because they were waiting to have collars or whatever. And he and a friend of his took some of the uniforms. They got dressed. And they came out when they saw the Germans, or I don't know if it was the Germans or the Hungarians.
It depends on what year.
It was in 1941, maybe.
That would still be the Hungarians.
The Hungarians.
The Germans came in March 1944. Yeah.
Yeah, so he wasn't already there. They took him before I was born, and I was born in 42. So it must have been the Hungarians. So he came, he saw some Hungarians rounding up some Jews, and he said to them, Lajos, let me take care of them. I need some fun today. Here's some money, go take a drink, and my friend and I will take them. They were taking them to the Danube to shoot them, and, you know. And so when they went away, my father said to them in Yiddish, just run, go. We're Jews, we're your friends, just run. And very interesting, my brother, about 5 years ago, went to a meeting where they had some interviews of people like this, and one of the women that was interviewed told the same story, that she happened to be in Budapest, and they were taking them to the Danube River to shoot them, and these two guys, they don't know who they were, came and told them to run away, and they were saved. I happen to know who it was. She actually lived here, but we didn't know the connection. But then the story became more real to us.
So your father was taken away in 41, right? Before you were born?
Right.
And you said to me when we talked earlier that he told you a lot of stories about his time in the forced labor. So what are the stories he told you?
He told us many stories. They walked for hours without shoes, without clothes. They made them, they were putting train tracks. That's what he was working on. One story that he always told us, can you stop it for a minute?
And resuming.
So he told us a story that they were running away. It was like almost towards the end of the war, and people were running all over the place. And he and his friend somehow got separated from everybody else, and they were running on a icy road somewhere, and they came to a road that split, and this tall man was standing there, and he spoke in 5 languages, in Hebrew and Yiddish and Hungarian and German, and he said to them, go this way, don't go that way. But they were so disoriented from this whole thing that they did not listen to him, and they went the way he told them not to go. Anyways, they ended up in a building, a barn, and they just went upstairs. They figured it was freezing cold, and they went to sleep. There was people sleeping up there, so they lay down and went to sleep. When they woke up in the morning, they realized all the people in the barn were dead. So they took their clothes, and then they went the way that the man told them to go. My father always said that it was Eliyahu Hanavi, that somehow, because he wasn't like real, he was so tall, you know, and all of a sudden he appeared and then disappeared. But he always told us that story.
Do you know if he was in his own, because I think he was a forced laborer in the Hungarian army as a Jew. Do you know if he was in his own clothes, or did they give him a uniform? Did he
didn't have a uniform. No. He wasn't a soldier. He was a forced laborer. Yeah.
And do you know where you said they were in Siberia, which sounds a little too far because they would have gone to Ukraine, which is just very cold as well.
He always said Siberia, so I don't know whether maybe Ukraine turned into Siberia.
But do you know their living condition in the camp where he was? Did he talk about that?
He always said it was awful. He had a bullet in his foot forever.
How come? What happened?
He was shot running away, and he kept running, and somehow he survived, and the bullet was in his foot forever.
Even after the war?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did he tell you anything about if they had enough to eat or what kind of food they had in the camp?
Not really. I mean, he was emaciated when he came back from the war, so I'm sure they didn't have steaks for supper, you know, and I think from what I heard from him, they barely survived. They gave them enough so that they should have enough energy to do the work that they needed. They didn't go overboard on anything. They needed them to work, so whatever it is they gave them.
Could they
But
observe?
he never really talked about his time there. I don't remember. It must have been really bad because, you know, sometimes bad things you just want to forget about.
Do you know if they could observe religious customs in the camp?
He didn't mention anything about that. And I never heard any stories about him not, or whether he ate. I'm sure he, you know, tried. He was a very religious man, so.
Yes, but you have pikuach nefesh. You can eat non-kosher if it's your life.
Yeah, I'm
Depends
sure.
on it, yeah.
Yeah.
How did he get back, or when did he get back from that?
After the war, a lot of survivors from there took trains to go back to Hungary. And it was the second day of Pesach. He always told us the story on Pesach that he arrived to my grandmother's house because he figured that probably after the war, wherever we are, we're going to end up in my grandmother's house in Miskolc. So he came with a friend, and I don't know exactly, he came with other people and they didn't get there, but he and his friend arrived at the house, and there were people living there, like non-Jews that took over the house. And he shooed them all out and said, "Get out of here. This is my mother-in-law's house. You have no right to be here." And he emptied out the house, and they got ready for Pesach, whatever they were able to scrape together. And the next day, they were sitting on, I don't know if it was a porch or outside of the house, and his friend said, "Look, Yoshi, your wife and daughter are there." And he was so depressed. He says, "Why are you making such crazy jokes?" You know, like he didn't know we were alive or not. He didn't know he had a daughter. And we were, my grandmother and all her sisters and my mother and I, we were on one of these fiacres, you know, with a horse. And we came and we got together that second day of Pesach.
Do you know if he and your mother saw each other while he was in forced labor before your mother ran away?
No, he didn't because when I was born, he didn't even know I was born. He didn't know he had a baby. There was no communication.
Now we will kind of wind back a little bit because we jumped ahead. Since you were talking about your father, if you could tell me his name and where and when he was born.
He was born June 4th, 1911. His name was Joseph Schwartz.
Where was he born?
He was born in Budapest.
And you mentioned that he had a fur store?
Yes.
So that was his...
Yes, he was a very good furrier. And we were supposed to go to Israel after the war, but my father prepared a whole container, everything we had, and sent it to Israel. And then he met one of his friends, and he was telling him, goodbye, we're going to go to Israel. And he said, why are you going to go to Israel? Who wears fur coats in Israel? You have to go to a cold place like Canada. So my mother had a second cousin who was living here already in Canada. And she wrote to him and asked if he could send us an affidavit and we could get papers. And
So that's how you came. Again, we'll kind of wind back. You said he had a fur store. Did he work in it alone? Did he work with...
he had workers, but he had a salon. We called it a salon.
And that was also on Khazar Street?
No,
lived?
I don't know where it was. I don't know. But we had a pretty decent life from what my father, used to say, right? Like before the war.
I was going to ask you about that, exactly.
Yeah,
about
we
their-
lived in a nice house. I kind of remember a little bit vaguely after the war. Like after the war, we came back there.
So describe what you remember of that apartment.
I remember it was like there was like a courtyard in the middle, and we lived on the second floor. We had a balcony. I don't remember the inside very much. I was, not that old.
Absolutely, you were very young, yes. Do you know how your parents met? Because your mother is from Miskolc, your father is from Budapest.
No, they never. I think it was through a shidduch, through matchmaker.
Shadchan, yeah. And when did they get married? What year?
They got married in 1939, I think. August 22nd, 1939.
In Miskolc or in Budapest?
I think in Budapest.
Your mother, what's her name?
So her name was Rose
Or Rosi?
Goldstein, Rosie Goldstein. She was 2 years older than my father. She was born October 13th, 1909.
In Miskolc.
Yeah.
And you had a story with her Hebrew names.
Yes. She was very sick when I was born. And then, by religious people, when somebody's very sick, so you add another name to their Jewish name to kind of ask Hashem to heal them. So my mother's name was Alta Rachel Chana, and they gave the name Alta. And that means she should live for a long time. And she did. She was 95 years old when she died.
Do you know anything about her education?
She went to school. I don't know exactly where, but she was really good with numbers. And when we came to Canada, she took care of, my parents opened up a fur store here, and she helped him in the business. She took care of all the business part. She took care of all the customers and took them to the designers. They used to make the canvases, and she was very, very active in the business, like a real partner.
What language did your two parents spoke to each other?
They spoke Yiddish, Hungarian, and then they learned English. My mother actually learned French also, because we lived in Paris for 3 years. Between when we got permission to leave Hungary until we got our papers to come to Canada, we lived in a little place called Montmorency. And I think I was 5 years old, and I went to like a kindergarten there, and I spoke French when I came here.
And we were going to come to that too. You said that both your parents came from quite religious families. How did they look? Like, what did they look like? Their appearance? Could you describe them? How did they dress? How did they?
There, I have pictures there.
We'll look at them too, but please describe for those who don't see them.
My mother always covered her hair. She didn't always wear a sheitel. I guess it was difficult in certain times to buy a sheitel or whatever. My grandmother wore a sheitel all the time. But when we came to Canada, she put on a sheitel. My father did not have a beard, but later on in life, after I got married, he grew a beard.
Did he wear a kippah outside?
All the time. All
Even
the
in
time.
Europe?
Yes. Yes.
Let me see. Occupation. Yeah, I think we'll get to. Just tell me about your siblings, because you have two siblings.
Yes. I have a brother and I had a sister. My sister passed away when she was 57, about 27 years ago. My brother is alive. He lives in New York. He has a family and 10 children, many, many grandchildren. And
Can you tell me their names and where and when they were born?
my sister her birthday was
The year, really.
1947. My brother was born in, my sister was born in 48, and my brother was born in 47.
But before you left Hungary, they were both
Yeah.
born in Hungary. And their names?
Her name was Mary, but her Jewish name was Nakama. And his name was Tzvi Herschel, and his name was George.
Were they born in Miskolc or in Budapest?
No, in Budapest.
Budapest. Because your parents lived in Budapest,
Yeah,
right? It's
after
just
the
the
war, yeah.
grandparents who lived in. And even before the war, they lived
Yes.
in Budapest, right? Yeah. So, you mentioned what happened to your grandfather, what happened to your grandmother, and you mentioned that she moved to Košice, to Kassa. Who was living there at the time? Which relatives?
My uncles, I have two uncles who lived in Czechoslovakia, in Košice, and they were quite wealthy. So my grandmother went to live there with them. And during the war, we all together, with that whole family, my uncle's families, we went to the mountains. And we survived there till after the war.
Those uncles were the husbands of your mother's sisters,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there were 5 girls. One stayed in Miskolc.
Now one died.
Yes, your mother, and then the
4 sisters. 3
yeah,
sisters.
Yeah, and all 3 sisters lived in Košice, or just 2?
Two sisters lived in Košice. One younger sister married and lived in Budapest.
And she survived there.
Yes.
In Budapest. Mhm. So what happened to your mother once your father was taken to forced labor in 41? What did she do?
She went to my grandmother because she was pregnant. There were things were not good in Budapest, like they were rounding up the Jews. And so she went to Miskolc to my grandmother. And from there, they all went to Košice, where I was born. And then they went to the mountains.
What did you tell you about that life? Because you were 9 months old when you went off to the mountains, so which is mid-1943. What did your mother tell you about life in Košice in 1942, beginning of 1943, during the war?
She didn't tell me much, but I know that when we went to the mountains, I know that my uncle, one of my uncles, used to carry me up the mountains. And his sisters, his my other uncle's sisters were also with them. There was a big family, and they told him to leave me, to give me to give me to someone, because they were afraid if I'm 9 months old, if I'm going to cry, we're going to, they're going to find our hideout. So, but my uncle said no way. So he took care of me because my mother was alone, and he carried me up the mountains, and that's how I survived.
What's the name of this uncle?
His name is Willy Frankel.
Were there any children in the other families, your mother's sister's families?
No. Yeah. My mother's other sister was Tookie's mother-in-law. And I'm not sure where their children were. But did you ever interview my cousin Vera Salzberg?
No?
Because she would remember many things that I don't, because she was older than me.
She's here in Montreal?
Yeah.
Could you introduce me to her?
I will.
That would be great, yeah.
I will. So she will remember a lot of things that I don't.
Okay.
Because we were together.
Okay.
And then I think she reminded me that my aunt put her in a monastery. So I'm not sure if there were other children with us, or they took the children and put them in. I don't remember that.
Well, how would you? You were 9 months old.
Yeah, no,
of course.
I'm just saying, even I never really asked, and so I don't know, but she would remember a lot of things.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Because she's like 5 years older than me. So she really, she just lost her husband, but she will do it.
Wonderful. We'll discuss it afterwards.
She's Tookie's sister-in-law.
Okay. What was I going to ask? Yeah. Where exactly in the mountains you were? You said the Carpathian Mountains, but really in Slovakia it's the Tatra. And the Carpathian
in
Mountains.
the Tatra Mountains.
No, Tatra, not the Carpathians. Okay.
Whatever, yeah.
Do you know how far it was from the city? How did they get there?
I don't know, but I know that my mother used to say that the Russian soldiers were controlling that part of the area, and that they used to bring me apples because I was a cute baby, and they used to play with me, and the soldiers used to bring me apples. And they kind of survived because of me.
Where did you hide in the forest, in the mountains?
I don't know.
Where did they stay?
I don't know. I don't remember. I for sure don't remember. And
Because you said something about caves, no?
That's what they said, but I don't know.
Did they tell you anything about like how they got food, how they made? Because you were there during a winter, and the winter of 43, 44, and then 44, 45.
My
That's a very
uncle
cold
actually
winter.
wrote a book about the experience, but I don't remember. There is a book that he wrote for
But
his
your parents, your
children.
mother didn't discuss it with you, how you
No.
like the survivor.
No. You know, they were happy not to discuss bad things, like they were happy they were here. We had to kind of pull the stories from them. They were not forthcoming with their experiences. They were happy to have been over it.
And did you try to pull stories from them?
No, not really.
Any of your brother, like your brother or your sister? So
They were
wasn't-
younger than me, so no. Like whatever stories they told us, we remember. But other than that,
Any other stories that you remember from that hiding period, which was a year and a half, if I count?
no, not really.
And when could you come out of hiding, or how did that happen? Your liberation.
It came. I was 3 years old when we came out, because that's when that's when they went home to Miskolc. So that must have been 45.
Do you know how you made your way back to Miskolc?
No,
And who went? You went. Your mother went. Your grandmother.
all of them.
That all the sisters and husbands, everybody went.
Yeah.
So
They were
they
all together.
so they never returned. The uncles and the aunts never returned to their
Yeah, they
houses in
did. They went
Košice,
back to Košice.
and then came to Miskolc.
No, we came to Miskolc, and they went back to Košice.
Okay, so it was just your mother, your grandmother, and you that went to Miskolc.
And maybe another aunt who wasn't married. She got married after the war.
Do you have any memory of arriving in Miskolc, seeing your father for the first time?
No. I wish I did. Some people at age 3 remember, but I didn't.
I guess it depends, yeah. So what happened after that? Did you stay in Miskolc for a while, your family?
I think we moved back to Budapest, and we started preparing to leave. And then my mother had the 2 children. And so I guess we had to stay until everything was taken care of. My father was making plans to go to Israel. They were making plans to sell the store and to buy all the things to take to Israel, you know.
Did you find like the store was restarted after the war?
I think so. Yeah, we had to live on something.
And you don't know what happened to the store during the war while he was gone several years?
No,
He didn't have a partner or anybody who
No.
would take care of
No.
it? No. Okay.
no.
So why did your parents want to leave? Did they ever tell you?
They just had enough of Hungary. They had enough of the goyim there. You know, they saw what was not good there, and they just wanted to leave. Everybody wanted to leave. My aunts and uncles from Košice, they went to Belgium. And they lived, first they went to Israel, and they lived in Israel for a while, and then they went to Belgium. They lived in Belgium for a while. And we went to Paris, and then came to Canada. And then we brought them all to Canada. We made papers for my whole family, for all of my mother's sisters and brothers-in-laws and children, and they all lived here for many, many years.
And why did your parents want to go to Israel rather than go west? Was there any reason?
My father was kind of a Zionist, you know. He loved, I mean, everybody loves Israel. You know, you want to go, it's like going home.
So did you have papers to leave? Could you leave legally?
Yeah, we had proper papers to leave Hungary. And that's why we left to go to Paris, because we didn't want to wait in Hungary to get the papers to Canada, because we didn't know what was going to be in Hungary. So the minute we got our papers, I remember going on a plane, and we went to, I remember Paris, I remember a little bit.
But tell me about it. First of all, why Paris? Why did you choose Paris? Was there anybody there that could help the family?
I think it was the coastal place. We knew we were going to have to go by boat to Canada. So it was a place that let Jews in, was easy to get. And there was a huge Jewish community in Paris. So when we came, he got a job in a fur place there. And we lived in the country, so it wasn't so expensive. And it was nice. It was a nice life. My mother remembers. She told me that it was a very nice life there.
Do you remember the house where you were staying?
It was a nice house. We had a big yard, I remember, with flowers. Yeah, it was nice. Country. It was country.
And your father went
My father traveled every day for about an hour and a half by train or whatever to Paris, to his work and back.
And your mother just stayed at home? She
Yeah,
was a stay-at-home
taking care
mom.
of us, yeah.
And you mentioned that you went to kindergarten there.
I went to a kindergarten there, yeah.
So tell me
Jewish.
about that.
I don't remember much. I remember it was a corner building. That's all I remember. But I now know that it belonged to Chabad.
Was that in Montmorency, where you were
Yes.
staying?
Yes.
What kind of community did your parents find there, Jewish community?
I don't really remember, but I know we had Shabbos. I remember lighting candles. I don't remember if he went to like where the shul was, but there were Jews there. A lot of Jews in Montmorency.
And your parents learned. You said your
Yeah,
mother
my
learned
mother was
French?
very good with languages. She learned French. She came here. She spoke a little bit of French, which was good because she didn't speak English. She only learned English later.
How about your father? Did he also learn French?
No.
Not really. And so you were there waiting for papers,
Right.
And then when did you get the papers?
We, I don't remember. We arrived in Canada in December 1950. And we were 1 week on the ship. So,
Where did you leave from the ship?
Le Havre.
Mhm.
And we arrived in Halifax. And I remember we arrived Friday morning, and they wanted to put us on a train to Montreal. And my father said, "I'm sorry, it's Shabbos. We can't go on a train." So I remember staying in a hotel in Halifax. And on Sunday, we took a train and came to Montreal. And my uncle that made us the papers waited for us, I remember, in Windsor Station and took us to his house. He lived on Esplanade. And we lived in his house for a week or 10 days. And then we found another house. We lived on St. Urban on the 3rd floor. And we lived there for quite a few years.
What are your memories of the crossing? You said that it took a week on the ship.
I don't remember. Nothing. It's funny. It's like no memory at all. I just remember being in Halifax in the hotel. That for some reason I remember that.
No Jewish family would take you for Shabbat dinner or
There was
Friday night
who
dinner?
was in Halifax.
There were. That's why I'm asking because there were.
No, we were in a hotel. We had food. I don't know, whatever we had. And then on Sunday we came by train.
So you arrived in Montreal. You were 7. Can you recall, little 7-year-old girl, what was your impression of the city after Europe, after Paris?
It was a city. I remember my uncle's house. He had 4 bedrooms on Esplanade. He had a big family already himself, and we were all squished in one room. And there were nice, very, very lovely people. I remember having good meals. She was a good cook, his wife. And then I remember my house on St. Urban. I remember we had an ice box. Do you know what an ice box is?
Yes.
So we had an ice box. The ice man used to come with the picks and bring up the ice until we got a fridge, an electric plug-in fridge.
The apartment that you had on St. Urban, did you only your family lived in the apartment, or did you have to share?
Just us. It was very nice. It was very nice. We had a big living room, dining room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and then there was a little room like in the back, kind of near the shed. And when my uncles came, so they stayed with us for a few days. So then we all squished in. The living room became a bedroom, and it's like we had like a couch, and it was a little bit high. And my aunts, my mother and her sisters were very short, and I remember, like, it's funny the things that you remember. She sat down on the couch and her feet were dangling. Little crazy things you remember.
Who was your landlord or landlady? Jewish family?
Yeah. Yeah, there were Jewish people. Every house was a Jewish house. Next to us were people that we knew. Downstairs were people that we knew. I mean, not that we met, and we became very good friends. You know, we lived there for at least, I think, 6, 7 years in that house, and then we moved to Park Avenue.
Still renting or
Still renting. First time my parents bought a house was after I got married. They bought a house on Barclay, but they rent the whole time. They rented.
Do you know why you moved to Park Avenue from St. Urban?
Because my father opened up, like for a few years, he was working for a furrier, and then they decided to open up on their own. So they wanted to be on Main Street because it was retail, and so my father, we had it was like a cottage, and downstairs was his factory, and upstairs and the kitchen, and upstairs we lived. And on Shabbos, the living room became the dining room. And during the week, it was where the customers came to try their coats.
You said that he had his factory. Did he work alone? Did he have?
No, he had people working with
employees.
him.
Jews?
2 or 3. One was a Greek, very nice man. I still remember him. And 2 were Chassidim.
How did he find his employees? Do you know?
Well, I told you he worked. There was a really big fur industry when we came. Mayor Street and Park Avenue and now de Maisonneuve. That was a big fur industry. All those buildings were full of fur people. And he worked for someone. And, you meet people. And when he left there, he met people who said they would come and work with him.
Do you know how he found his first job? Did someone help him find his job, or he just walked around?
I'm sure that there was the Jayas here. It was on Esplanade. And I know he went there, and they probably gave him ideas. I mean, I was a young girl. I didn't go into details of how or where.
Of course. Who was this first person he worked for? Do you remember that company?
No. But the man's name was Stamos, I remember.
Jewish?
No. He was Greek.
The first person he worked for was Greek.
Worked with. I don't know if he owned the place but he was very good friends, and then he came to work with my father.
I see. Okay. And there was not a problem working for someone else to not work on Shabbat? Or on
No, he
Friday?
didn't work on Shabbat. No.
Well, obviously not, but it wasn't a problem.
No.
Did your mother find any work here?
She worked with my father.
And before that she didn't?
No.
Okay.
No.
You mentioned that you went to Jayas. Do you know if you got any other help from Jayas, you kids, or from any other organization?
I don't know. I don't think so. They were they worked very hard. And we made, they made a living.
How did you find the community here? Where did they belong in terms of synagogue and?
When we moved to Park Avenue, so they opened up a synagogue right across the street from us, and he went to daven there, and he became very close to that community. There were a lot of Hasidim living around us on Edward Charles, on St. Joseph, on Laurier. So it was a really nice community.
Which stream of Hasidism? Like what?
It wasn't anything particular, just very nice, normal Hasidim. Didn't belong to anything specific. It was a melting pot. They came from everywhere. I remember when we first started to get kosher milk and things like that. It was amazing. I remember Rosh Hashanah, the streets were packed. People walking up and down the street. There was like thousands and thousands of Jews.
Did you and your mother and your siblings also went to that synagogue on high holidays? Yeah. So that was your local synagogue.
Yeah,
And he stayed there the whole
yeah.
time.
Even when he moved, the synagogue also moved, and he moved with it, kind of.
And you mentioned that you remember when you started getting kosher milk. So was there a time when you couldn't get milk or you couldn't get certain kosher products?
We always had kosher products because my uncle, the one who brought us, he had a grocery store. And he had all the kosher products that, like meat. And I remember him telling my mother that they would send out somebody to check, to the milking, to the cows, and they would get special milk.
Mashgiach.
But then when the Satmar group came, they opened up a lot of kosher, like meat. The shechita became better, and the milk, like things. The bigger the community got, the more everything else became better.
Of course, of course. Your schooling. You got here, you were 7, so you had to go to school. Where did you go to school?
I went to a public school. It was called Fairmount School. It was on Waverly and Fairmount. And, just went to school and came home.
You had to go to school in English, though. How did that go? You didn't speak English.
I didn't speak English, but I learned. I learned quickly. And I spoke French because I was came from France. So the teacher spoke French with me until I learned how to speak English.
Do you remember, as a little immigrant child, to, reactions from your classmates because you spoke
There were a
differently?
lot of immigrants in my class. A lot of kids like us. I remember there were some people that lived on my block and around the block that their mothers were working in the factories. And I used to take the younger kids to school with me for 50 cents a week. And I would supervise them when they were eating lunch to make sure that whatever the parents brought, that the kids ate. There were a lot of immigrants in the school. So I think we managed.
So you don't feel that you didn't stick out in
No.
that environment?
No.
What was the language of communication with these kids?
A lot of them were Hungarian. We spoke Hungarian.
At home, you spoke Hungarian with your parents?
In the beginning, yeah.
And then?
And then when they learned English, we spoke English. We wanted them to learn English. So once we spoke English, we spoke English with them.
They didn't teach you children Yiddish?
Yeah, of course. We spoke Yiddish at home too.
But the main language was Hungarian and then English.
Till they learned how to speak English. I speak 5 languages fluently.
And any of the children that you went to school with, would you use Yiddish as the common language?
I don't think so. No.
Why not? They
I don't
didn't
know.
speak Yiddish? You said a lot of the children were immigrants, meaning immigrant Jewish.
Yes.
So
A lot of people came in the 50s from Poland, from Hungary, from Czechoslovakia. They all were working in factories and in different industries. And I was friends with a lot of those kids.
Who were in the school? Who were your friends? Who did you become friendly with?
With other kids who were like us, from Jewish.
Any particular countries where you felt more affinity with Jews coming from?
I think they were all from Hungary, basically.
So big Hungarian community there. What do you remember of your teachers?
I don't. And I guess they didn't make too much of an impression on me.
And your parents, while you were going to school, they were working. Who became, let's say, their social circle? Who were the people that they would meet
Also
with?
immigrants that just came. A lot of people that came then. My parents used to invite them to us for Shabbat dinner. Many people. And then when my family came, then those were then we had our own family circle. My grandmother, her sisters, cousins, their sisters, their cousins, everybody brought somebody after. Like when they came, they brought their family, so it was like mushroomed out to a big, huge family.
So you would say that let's say the social life revolved more around the family and the relatives once they were here.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long did it take for them to come here? Like you came in 52?
We came in 50. We were still living on St. Urban when they came. So it was probably around 3 years later. So like in around 53 they came. 54 they came, like staggering, not everybody at the same time. 1 year one came, and then.
Did you keep in touch with anybody from Fairmount School? Like, were there any friendships that survived?
No, but in
elementary
high school, yes. When I went to Baron-Bing, I'm still friends with people. Sonia, we're a huge class, graduate class, and I think out of 35 kids, 33 were Jewish. So I remember my teachers were they were all Goyim. I think we had one Jewish teacher. But they knew that Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock I had to leave, and in the winter. And they were so nice. They would say, Julie, you can get up. You can leave now. And it was different. Life was different. Everybody was very nice to the immigrants.
You said that all your teachers were non-Jewish. Did you experience ever any anti-Semitic remarks or anything negative towards
Nothing.
Jewish children?
Nothing. They were exceptionally nice to us. I mean, when we deserved it, they weren't, but in general, they were very, very nice.
What are your best memories or your best memory from high school?
Many.
Tell me a few.
Sports. We were in all the sports teams. I became a champion badminton player. We had drama group. We had a choir. Speaking club. Many things.
And you participated in
Yeah.
all these social activities?
Yeah.
Were you ever a member of the YMAJ? The Jewish Y
Yeah,
was
sure.
because
Sure.
they had social events there.
I never partook of the social events there. No.
What was your social life like in high school, or what did you do and with whom? What were the activities outside of school?
Outside of school, I didn't do very much activities because there were very few religious girls in my class, or religious people in my class. And my parents tried to, so we went to Bnei Akiva. And then after that, I went to Mesilas Shabbos, which was a Chabad organization. So those were my outside activities. School activities were in school.
On high holidays, Yom Kippur, the school closed because there were so many Jews, or
No, but
those who were religious didn't go?
right. No, none of the Jews went. But there was non-Jews in the school. So the school was open, but we weren't obliged to go.
What was the relationship between the few non-Jews in the school and the Jewish children? How did they get along, or what were the dividing lines between them?
There was very little. I think in my class there were 2 Chinese boys, so they were also immigrants, and there was, I think, maybe 2 non-Jewish girls. I don't think anybody made any. I don't think it was a big deal because most of the kids were not religious, so they were kind of on the same wavelength. I mean, we didn't have horns, so they didn't see us as being Jews. You know.
Did your siblings go to the same schools?
No, when my siblings started school, there was already Beis Yaakov and Beis Rivka and yeshivas. When I started school, there was no religious schools. There was the Jewish People's School, and it was right around the corner from me. My father wanted to take me there, and we went for an interview. And when he walked into the principal's office to register me, he noticed that he wasn't even wearing a kippah. So my father thought, you know what? If this is a Jewish school and he's not even wearing a kippah, I'd rather send her to a non-Jewish school. At least there she knows that it's not a Jewish school, and that's how non-Jews behave. But in a Jewish school, he didn't want me to be in that kind of a Jewish environment. So that's why he didn't send me there. But my brothers and sisters all went to Orthodox Jewish girls' school and boys and yeshivas.
There. They were there at the time? It's on Bezina, right? No, Beis Yaakov.
No, Beis Yaakov was on Waverly and Fairmount. And the yeshivas, there was one on Park Avenue, there was on G Men's, there were many yeshivas. And then when my brother became bar mitzvah, my parents sent him to Cleveland to Telzer Yeshiva there, like a higher learning.
And what did you do after graduating from high school?
After I graduated from high school, I took a course in kindergarten teaching
At
Sir Thomas More Institute. It was a specific course that they gave, and then I got a job teaching kindergarten in Beth Rivka, and then I got married.
How did you meet your husband?
I was teaching with a girl in Beth Rivka, and her husband was studying with my husband. So we got invited. I got invited for supper to their house, and my husband happened to be there. So that's where we met.
If you could tell me his name and a little bit of his background.
His name is Yitzchak Gnevish, and he was born in Krakow, Poland in 1939. He has a whole long story, which
he will tell me, I know, but when did they come here?
They came, I think, in 1957 he came here. And he has a whole story how he got here.
We'll talk about that then. So you got married. Where did
in 1961 I got married. I was 18.
18. So how long did you work? 1 year?
1 year.
1 year. Where did you move? Where did you settle with?
We lived on Darlington Place for about 3 years. And then we moved up to Plamondon when the Lubavitch Yeshiva moved up. That's where my husband was studying. And then we bought this house.
After you got married, you had kids. So tell me the names of your kids.
I had 6 children. My oldest one is Yehuda. He's 61 years old. My second one was Brindy, and she's 60. My third one is Shmuley, and he's 57, going to be 58. The next one was Meir, and he's 55. My next one is Pinchas, and he's 53. He's going to be 50. Yeah, he's 53. And my baby is Dina, and she is 51.
Did you go back to work after when they were
Yes.
older? So what did you do
I was
when they were
teaching.
older?
That was my profession. I was a kindergarten teacher.
You went back to Besrivka?
I went actually first to Beis Rivka to teach, and then I got a job in the yeshiva with the boys teaching. So I taught for till I had about 3 kids. I was teaching.
And then?
And then I stayed home. When I had my 4th child, I stayed home. And I was helping I had like a little business selling giftware for Christmas. But it was a seasonal business. It was just, to keep me busy. And then when my children grew up, about 45 years ago, I started the jewelry business that I'm in right now.
And you're doing that alone, or are you doing it with your husband?
No, I started it alone, and then my husband came in to run the business with me.
Are any of your children involved in it?
Yes, my daughter, my son, one of my daughters, one of my sons, and a lot of my grandchildren. I have 45 grandchildren, and today I had my 101st great-grandchild. And this is my revenge.
Mazel tov. Have you experienced any discrimination in Canada as a Jew?
No, not really. I mean, not openly.
What do you mean not openly? Did you?
I mean, I
remember?
see around what's happening, but I personally did not. But I know a lot of people today are.
In raising your children, how do you think that your experiences as a baby in hiding and just the experiences during the war, how do you think that influenced the way you raised your children here in Canada?
I don't think it really had very much influence because I don't really remember that much. It wasn't for me a traumatic experience because somehow I blocked it out of my mind, so I don't remember very much. So I didn't really have a traumatic childhood, so it didn't affect how I brought up my children.
And your parents, the way your parents brought you up, do you think that there was something there from their experiences that...
My parents were very strict, like everything was... I think their experience was... Their lives were difficult. They had a lot of tourists in their lives there and then afterwards. I think that they try to do the best they can. I can't blame them for anything,
It's not even a question of blame. I was just thinking that, as you say, you don't remember,
No,
but
we
they
had
do.
we had a pretty happy childhood. I don't remember. I mean, I didn't have any traumatic experiences as a child.
And you did mention that they didn't really want to talk about it, and
They
tried
didn't.
to put it behind.
They didn't.
Were any of your children interested to know more?
My son, one of my sons is very interested, and he did a lot of research on my husband's side. He went to Poland, and he had a lawyer check out all kinds of things, and they found some really, really interesting things, They found my husband's father's factory and things like that. He's very interested.
You mentioned that you never went back to Hungary. Is there any reason why? On purpose, or it just never occurred to you to go back?
When the children were little, it was hard to travel. Then when I went into business, I had to do a lot of traveling for business. And we somehow never got around to doing any historical trips. And my husband really does not like Europe. For him, it's a graveyard. And so he never wanted to come, and alone I wouldn't go. I don't know, maybe one day with the kids.
Is there anything else you would like to add that I haven't asked, we haven't talked about, we haven't touched upon?
I don't know. I think pretty much,
We covered what you could remember.
I think pretty much we covered whatever. I can only say that I have a very happy life, and I have wonderful children and an amazing husband, and that's my revenge to Hitler.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you for this.